Hey guys, welcome to Align Online. Today is
Hello.
September 15th. I cannot believe it's already September. We're just talking about it. We're kind of transitioning into this final quarter of the year, but we are so glad that you are here. I don't know where you are today, but it's a beautiful day in Austin, Texas. And we are here to continue the conversation about culture. We're still diving into it. So much goodness, so much rich conversation has come from the last few weeks. And with that, man, I want to turn it over to my counterpart today. Josh, how you doing, man?
Hey, doing well, Graylin. Doing really well and excited to keep the conversation going. Like Graylin said, we've been talking about culture, and the way that we define culture here at Alignment Leadership goes through 5 common traits of a person's worldview. And so we've been unpacking them one by one, week after week here. And so we've got another one to dive deeper into today. So you can go back through all the videos that we've been doing every week on Tuesdays. You can go watch those if you missed them. And another resource that we always want to point people to is our culture map. So the culture map is a team building tool that helps you assess your current team culture. Everyone gets a link to take this assessment. You get a digital booklet to download and view your results together and walk through some deeper questions on each of these 5 traits and what each person uniquely brings to the team. It's a resource that it's more than just a good team building resource. It's more than just something that highlights and celebrates everyone's uniqueness and their diversity. It really helps to pull people together into their the uniqueness of the team and why that even matters as you all serve under the same purpose or mission as a team. So if you're really looking for something to connect, bond a team, push your team toward higher levels of efficiency because there's greater levels of trust and just knowledge of one another, this is a great source to get you started.
Right.
So that is the culture map. You can check that out at alignleadthrive.com/culture-map. So today we are diving into another one of these traits. And what have we covered so far, Graylin? We've covered
Traditions.
We've covered traditions. We've covered preferences.
That's last week.
Yep. And we've covered experiences, right? That was the first one I believe that we did. So we didn't do them in the same order as we typically do. When we typically talk about the 5 traits, we usually say hopes, preferences, traditions, experiences, and beliefs. We kind of did them in a different order intentionally, but we started with experiences, traditions, then preferences. Today, we're going to be talking about hopes.
Yes. It's exciting, man. And the cool thing about this is, we all have them. And so as we have the conversation today, we're gonna do a couple exercises. We're gonna unpack this a little bit further. But we just want you to again join us for this time. Join us in the conversation. And again, this is all about equipping you and your team with resources to continue to develop, to continue to flesh out and create the culture you want in the environment that you serve. So, what are we gonna jump in today? Josh?
Yeah, well, it's kind of related to hopes, and we'll talk about the definition in a minute. But thinking of the term bucket list, I think everyone by this point is familiar with bucket list, like your top things that you want to do before, while you're living this life. So, Graylin, if you were to think of one thing on your just personal bucket list in life, not even maybe not work related, but what's something on your bucket list?
Okay, something that's on my bucket list, because I got a long bucket list, but one thing we were talking about today is I've always wanted to meet Stevie Wonder. More specifically, like be in the studio with Stevie Wonder, probably somewhere within the time frame of like Songs in the Key of Life. But like just getting to see how he works, and he's always been somebody I've just kind of admired musically and just personally. So
heck yeah.
Meet Stevie Wonder, man.
If you ever get that opportunity, you better take me with you. That's
absolutely.
My personal bucket list for me is I probably couldn't even list them all right now, but there are 10 national parks that I want to backpack. Just like the big ones, Yosemite, Yellowstone, Grand Canyon.
Oh yeah.
And I couldn't even list all 10 right now on the spot, but personal bucket list is sometime to get a backpacking trip in each of the kind of like top 10 most rugged national parks that we have. So career-wise, if you think about the workplace, and when we're talking about this definition of culture, we're talking about it in the context of teams and the workplace. So, Graylin, if you were to think about your bucket list when it comes to your career
Yeah.
or job, whatever, or your role, what's one thing that you hope for that's kind of on your bucket list related to work?
Yeah. Simply put, I don't want to work anymore. And you say that, and it's like, oh my gosh, my boss is probably listening to this podcast.
Great.
But the reality is, I've always wanted to work in a career or a field that doesn't feel like work, where I actually love what I'm doing and I want to have enough resources. It's really about having resources enough to really own my time.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to do something I love and I'm not bound to a paycheck to show up to work every day. So that's what I mean. I don't really want to work anymore. I still want to do the work, but not work anymore. But yeah. What about you, man?
You feel like you're working. For me, it would be to, my kind of passion for coaching and
Yes.
leadership coaching and things like that. One of my kind of bucket list career-wise is to be a coach of coaches. Mm-hmm. So to be running a team, maybe it's on a alignment leadership someday, or maybe it's my own business, but it's to be leading a team of coaches and to be primarily just leading them through coaching the coaches, as they are coaching others and coaching their clients and leading them. So that's one of my bucket lists, is to use that skill, that passion that I have for coaching more tangible way.
Yeah.
So why I asked that to kind of lead into the discussion today is because these, as you just mentioned yours, I mentioned mine. These hopes are things that are we carry around with us all the time, right. And they're with us, and so they're a part of our definition of culture. So let's talk about their significance. Let's talk about what they are and why they're part of the definition.
Right. And why they're important. Why do they fit into this? So when we, like Josh already said, when we talk about hopes, we're talking about those things that those big things, specifically, or little things that we dream about, that keep us up, that inspire us, that we daydream about, because oftentimes they are rooted internally, and they'll manifest in the things and the directions that we pursue as far as our careers, like the high paying job, the finishing the degree, the dream vacation, backpacking in a national park, a remote area, meeting somebody who's really influential in your life. Like, these things are there. Sometimes we kind of just tuck them back in our subconscious because, they seem so far off, but they're there influencing the way we show up, influencing how we exist, in our personal and professional environments, and ultimately influencing the culture. So absolutely. That's why we're here today. That's what we're going to talk about today. So
yeah, absolutely. I agree. They're present, and we carry them with us every day. They're the things that to me are a little bit even more invisible. Some mm-hmm. of the things that we've just previously talked about, preferences and traditions.
Right.
Preferences and traditions of all these 5 common traits, I think, are probably the ones that you might be able to actually observe in somebody else. When you look at our definition of traditions, the way they traditionally respond to these, circumstances, you can see certain patterns in behavior. You can see certain preferences people have for their communication style or how they want to tackle the work or solve problems. You can kind of see that on the outside, but hopes, similar to like experiences, you're not going to really know them unless someone actually talks about them or unless you ask.
Right.
So that's why, but yet they're really significant, right? So you were just saying, like, it's the big things and the little things. So it's the things that we like aspire to in our own careers, and it's these little things like the day-to-day things. Like I want to just finish this to-do list, or I want to get all these things done by the end of the week, so that, and then fill in the blank. There's something that we're like hoping for, some experience or outcome or whatever. It could be even personally related. A lot of times, like, what we hope for at work is so that there's some payoff on the personal side of things. It's like, well, if I get all these things done, then I can, maybe leave work a little bit early on Friday and make it to, I don't know, dinner date with my wife and get the kids down early or something like that. It's like, or I got a soccer game with my kid. There's sometimes even a personal payoff to what we're hoping for at work. And so those things just completely influence, like, just the subtle ways that we show up. at work. And like you said, those things added up, influence the culture.
Absolutely. It's something we've mentioned before, is that these subtle things, these hopes, like preferences we talked about, even some of the traditions, they create expectations oftentimes as well, and so they go unsaid, and they tend to influence. And so I love what you mentioned about being intentional about having the conversation, asking. We don't know
Yeah.
they exist because we don't really talk about it.
Yeah.
And so again, this is again why that culture map that we mentioned earlier is such a great tool, because it really equips you with those resources
Yeah.
to engage with your team.
Yeah.
So I think that's great, man. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think along the lines of those expectations, I think the type of there is, like, I think without knowing it, there's a type of influence that we're always trying to have on
Mhm.
our team or maybe our organization that is rooted in our hopes. Like you said, these expectations. And sometimes we don't even know our own expectations until they're blocked.
Right.
And then they become really apparent,
Well, that's so
when
good.
you're like, oh my gosh, well, I didn't even realize that was my expectation. Sometimes our hopes work like that.
Yeah.
One to make this, I'm thinking of some specific examples. I'd love for you to share one too. I'll share one kind of from our team in the journey, as we've only been a business, consulting business for a little over a year, and so we're new, about a year and a half old as a team, and so we're new at this. We're a startup, right? So that means when we initially came together with the idea, we pulled together a team and we launched out. We had a vision. We had hopes for what it would look like 6 months or a year from then, right?
Mhm.
And we start building it, start pursuing it. But I mean, you really kind of, you can set your sights on one thing, but you're always going to be, in a sense, to some degree, building it as you go, making it up as you go. When you're in a
Right.
startup, when you don't have something firmly established yet, so that just means that created an environment that I've noticed in the last year and a half of being with this team since the beginning, of having sometimes like the group split in two, or sometimes like two, three, four different kind of big ideas for what would be the ideal future for the
Mhm.
team.
Mhm.
Um, One really simple example of this was about a year ago when there was conversations, I remember, on the team about, should we be a media company or should we be a consulting company?
Right.
And it was like the end result was kind of accomplishing the same thing. We believe so passionately in our purpose, and we want to really influence people with this really hopeful message for the workplace.
Right. Right.
But in terms of when people were putting their hopes into, like, well, what's the, we had a skeleton idea, but what's like
Mhm.
the, flesh and bones on this? Like, what's the greater detail of this? There was just different ideas.
Right.
And people have hopes, but to understand how that influences culture, you have those hopes, you carry those ideas, and anytime you have this idea, it's really a hope that you're pursuing.
Right.
You start showing up to work a little bit differently. You start, maybe you find these certain resources that really connect to this idea, this vision you have, this hope you have, and you start sharing the links with everybody. Hey, check out this other organization, or check out this website, or hey, what if we did this?
Yeah.
And everyone starts kind of like, it's in subtle ways without knowing it, trying to they're sharing their hopes with each other, and
Right.
essentially that's influencing the culture in terms of how we communicate, how we work together, what decisions we make week in and week out. So I just think it's a really key thing to drill down into, is what are we hoping for, and
Right.
how do we know what other team members are hoping for.
Yeah,
So
and it's these types of conversations that really kind of help you, like looking back, like in hindsight, kind of recognizing that although we all have the best intentions, we're all trying to move this
oh
mission
yeah,
forward, this company forward, to serve this greater purpose. But we all had different things or thoughts or priorities or hopes,
yeah,
and how to accomplish that. And so that's where you can meet. That's where the conflict can come, even rooted in, like, this really positive purpose
oh
initially.
yeah,
Yeah. And so I remember, that story reminds me of, like, my in the world of education. And so being a campus leader, I was an assistant principal for a little bit, and being on campus, each assistant principal had a different department role or
Mhm.
team that they were overseeing, and over a course of, a few years, I was over like discipline and ROTC and fine arts, and somebody would be over, continuing in ed, community involvement, like
Mhm.
these types of things. And so in my role, just based on who I'm serving and who I'm kind of focusing my attention, I'm thinking of all of these resources that could potentially, help bring our campus up to this level, because I'm looking at it through the lines or the lens of like, discipline and fine arts. And somebody else could be looking at it through a different lens or different initiative. But we come together now in this room and space where we have a limited amount of resources to put something in action, which again would bring our campus forward or create the culture that we want. But now we have to figure out what to do with each of these hopes that will ultimately influence the culture of this campus. And so it's
Mhm.
like, man, you don't recognize it if you're not talking about it. Like, these are all great things, but it's so important to recognize that, having different hopes or having a set hope,
Yeah.
can create conflict. And without
Yeah. Yeah.
dialogue, it's
Be- and because when people
that's
imagine an idea in that example, like you're talking about, people might imagine, okay, we've got a finite number of money and time
mhm,
to invest.
mhm,
And so here's what we can do. People have their idea. They start to not just imagine like the ideal scenario, but they also start to hope or imagine what their role is in accomplishing that, right?
mhm. Oh yeah,
And now you've got these like attachments, like emotionally, to like, I'm hope, in the education world, maybe it's like, I don't know, but maybe it's like, well, I hope that when we, reconfigure roles and responsibilities for the next school year, I really hope that I'm placed in this specific, like,
sure.
you know, this responsibility. This is what I'm hoping for. And then if it doesn't happen, it's like, you know, frustration,
Right. Oh yeah.
disengagement, maybe distrust, or maybe, you feel like, um, yeah, you could, I've heard all sorts of different kinds of labels for that kind of stuff. Like,
Sure.
oh, it's politics. Oh, it's whatever, and it all comes down to like these internal things we get frustrated about, and we don't know how to unify on them. We don't know how to like, in a healthy way, really talk through these things. But yeah, I think they're present, always present, and there's these things we're kind of chasing after.
Yeah. You,
Um,
you said something that stuck with me when we were kind of like getting ready for this. You put it in the notes, is that we experience when our frustration is rooted in blocked hopes.
yeah,
And when that happens, we experience discouragement and disengagement
yeah,
in our role, on our teams.
yeah,
And it's just, man, that's such a key statement.
yeah,
Just a realization as well. Like, man, you may be looking, you see it as, oh, it's politics. Oh, they just don't care
yeah,
about this as much as I do. But in reality, the deeper issue is that I hope was blocked, and now I'm experiencing these feelings
absolutely.
that I'm
Uh,
calling it something
I've
else.
lots of people that I've spoken with when they leave a job or when they're thinking about leaving an organization. It's You could almost always put it in this category of a blocked hope,
Hmm.
whether that's a hope for their role, hope for their position or responsibility, or whether it's a hope for a way a certain relationship was supposed to work out in the work setting,
Yeah,
right? Like they have some hope for the way their boss interacts with them or the way their teammates interact with them, and it's not happening.
yeah,
And
good.
by and large, I would say it's not every time, but I would say most of the time when I'm talking with people about those situations, most of the time, I don't get the sense that people spend a good amount of effort really communicating clearly what those hopes were. There's often kind of a expectation that people just sort of know.
Right.
You know, they should know this. And so yeah, I think those blocked hopes absolutely create frustration, create disengagement. If right now, if you're listening to this and you think of, if maybe you're personally feeling disengaged from your work, or maybe you can think of somebody on your team who you sense is just more recently been disengaged, either relationally from the team, you can tell that they're just kind of more distant,
Right.
or maybe just disengaged from their work. You can tell they just don't like their role.
Hmm.
I guarantee buried in that disengagement and the emotions they're experiencing there is some hope that they're still expecting to happen or wanting to happen that isn't happening. And so a conversation, through this this might be a good angle or a good approach, is to talk through those things. Like, what are you hoping for? What is the ideal scenario that isn't happening for you yet? Because those, whether positive or negative, our hopes are influencing the culture all the time.
Right.
And I think sometimes those hopes can lead to us like asserting ourselves in positive ways as we try to influence in the way that we want to influence. And sometimes those hopes, we end up showing up in a negative way, in a way we're trying to pursue something we're hoping for, but it's coming out in a negative way. So
yeah, I love that. And I love the thought, the idea of really equipping leadership with like tools to listen for these types of this disengagement or a missed hope. And I think we've talked about it. I think this would be a really cool add-on. So let's make that happen. I think it would be great to equip leaders with that, Josh. And I think you're the right person to do this, my friend. So
thanks, man.
As we begin to land this plane, I just want to continue that. Like, what can we do today? What would be like a call to action of sorts to help us? I hope that we have going forward from this conversation today. So
well, the first thing that comes to mind, I'm going to start with something personal, and or at least put the emphasis on a personal application for people, and that's like just to think about your own satisfaction level, your own fulfillment level in your role with the work currently.
Yeah.
And if it's low, and if you're just feeling like, and I'm sure, I mean, and you and I, our team, we've openly discussed like all these changes as a result of COVID. I mean, this has completely thrown our company, through upheaval, and we've had to figure a lot of stuff out. So there's a lot of room for like, hey, this is not what I thought my role was going to look like.
Right.
6 months ago, and we've had to talk through those things.
Right.
But I'm just saying, for the person listening, if you're sitting in a place right now where you're like, yeah, I'm not content. I am not even close to feeling fulfilled in my role or with my team or whatever. I think the call to action is to think about what is it that you're hoping for, and to really push yourself to communicate that with your team or your supervisor, and to bring that out in the open, to talk very openly about it, not in a way of like accusing people or blaming people or whatever, but just simply saying, I'm realizing that this is something I'm aspiring for, hoping for, and it's getting blocked, and I can't see a pathway to it right now. But but I'm looking for a pathway to it.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing to me how when I've had those kinds of discussions with supervisors that I've had in the past, it's amazing to me how often, beyond my expectation, the response is like, well, okay,
yeah,
let's talk about how in your, maybe even in your current role, we can start to figure out, little ways we can begin kind of creating that pathway for you.
Yeah.
It's surprising to me how often that actually is more of a possibility than I think. I'm usually just scared to have the conversation.
Right.
So anyway, that's first call to action.
I love
is
that.
to voice your hopes. Tell people about what you're pursuing, what you're aspiring for.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. On the other side, yes, there's like an individual responsibility to take the time to think of those hopes, and so you can articulate them to your leadership. But leaders, I know we get so busy working, pursuing the bottom line, ROI, all of those things. Let's slow down and find someone on your team, someone you lead or you supervise, and just ask them, what are your hopes? What are your hopes for your career? Ask them what their hopes are beyond, their career, and really begin to kind of create that culture that makes people feel okay with sharing their dreams or their hopes, even if it doesn't, include the company they work for, So, but I think, that's just really good investment in people. And so,
I guarantee a conversation like that, a leader pursuing their people in that way, if there's anyone who's under a cloud of disengagement, despair, disappointment, and a leader comes to you and just says, hey, how are you doing? What are you hoping for in your role or on this team or in this organization that's maybe not happening right now? I guarantee conversation like that from a leader is just going to lift that cloud.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, it's just going to be like, wow, a person's going to feel seen and heard by
Yeah.
a conversation like that. And I guarantee, even if you can't in that given moment be like, great, well, next week we're going to give you a new role. Even if you can't do that, the conversation alone, I guarantee, will increase someone's engagement.
Oh,
It will
yeah.
increase someone's just feeling like, okay, I can, I can push through this. I can get through this, and I can still be, a great contributor and a key part to this team. I guarantee it would turn things around,
Absolutely.
or begin to.
Yeah,
So
you're giving someone permission to dream. So
that's right.
that's a huge part of what we do, just creating that security. So
Good.
we understand that we always talk about it within our organization, simple but not easy. These concepts, these principles, these definitions are simple, but they're not easy to implement. And so, with that, Josh, before we leave today, why don't you plug Culture Map one more time?
Yeah.
So
alignleanthrive.com/culture-map. Your whole team can take this and just dive deep into discussions about these hidden things that we all bring to the team. We all add and contribute to the culture every day. And take this as team assessment. It gives you the ability to kick the conversation off, dive deep into these things, and start to know what's hidden beneath the surface in everybody, and help to channel it toward a really positive direction toward your purpose, your mission that you guys are trying to pursue as a team. So check it out. You'll be glad you did. And secondly, if you're just loving the conversation on culture, and this is something that you're really passionate about, check out Unit 2 right here on our Facebook page. As we go through the book, you'll hear from the author, our founder, Chris Muroff, as he gives you a little bit of an introduction to each chapter. You can purchase the digital book right now on Amazon, and the print version, the hard copy, comes out in early November. And so there's just a couple key ways to just kind of keep diving into these resources if you find these things just really interesting, fascinating, and you want to learn more. As well, we're back next week to cap off this conversation on culture with the last of the 5 common traits, which is beliefs.
Oh, man.
And so it's a deep one. It's a deep one. It's a big one. Beliefs are huge, and we all have them, and they're probably maybe the hardest thing for people to talk about, right? Especially in a season like we're in right now. It's like that's a hard topic often. So we'll be talking about beliefs, how they influence culture on the team, and how you can begin to unpack them as a team in a way that keeps people feeling connected and united, and not polarized. So
for sure.
Join us next week on Tuesday, and we'll see you then.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Have a great
Thanks,
day.
everyone.